Welcome to the fifth chapter, the Book of Nehemiah. Basically, it's talking about servitude, slavery, fine line between the two. But with the Jew, as you go into Leviticus 25:39, you'll see that a Jewish person could be sold into bondage, but they were not to be they were not to be treated as a slave, but as a servant, somebody that's working for the master, the person that they're working for. And then there were laws as far as release. After a certain period of time, they were to be released. But apparently, this wasn't always the case as far as what happened is so many places things changed and they didn't go along with the laws of God, but went along with the laws of man and treated the people harshly and probably kept them longer than they should. And there was, you can go in the Old Testament, read, there are all sorts of laws concerning a person that was in bondage. But here, these people have come back from Babylon, and some of the people were fairly wealthy, and other ones were not. So apparently, they went into bondage, and it became a problem, as we see with Nehemiah. And he begins and he says, "And the cry of the people and their wives was great against their brothers of the Jews." So there was that problem. People were complaining against other Jews. "And there were some saying, with our sons and with our daughters, we are many, and we shall take grain and shall eat and shall live." Now, I'm not exactly sure the wording in the Greek, how this whole thing fits in, because it doesn't, what they're saying basically is that somehow that they need food and they are selling they're selling themselves for the food because they have to have it, and they buy, selling themselves to the rich people. "And there are some saying, our fields and our vineyards and our houses we mortgaged, and we shall take grain and we shall eat." Now they needed to do that, to mortgage their houses, vineyards, fields, so that they didn't, they owned them, but it's sort of like really the bank owns the property until you pay it off. So these rich people had control of what the people were doing on their own property to a certain extent, and were probably misusing the privilege. And there are some saying, well, we borrowed money for the tribute of the king of our fields and our vineyards and our houses. So they borrowed money somehow. So then they're maybe to the king. I'm not exactly sure who, but again, by selling these things, they were still putting themselves under a sort of a bondage. "And now our flesh is as the flesh of our brothers, as their sons, our sons. And behold, we are tyrannizing over our sons and our daughters, selling them for bondmen. And there are some of our daughters being tyrannized already, and there is not power to redeem them by our hands, for our fields and our vineyards belong to the important ones." So they are being tyrannized over, lorded over is the word, by force even. And so their sons and daughters are bondmen to these wealthy people, and being tyrannized. And what happens, Nehemiah, it says, "And I fretted very much as I heard their cry and these words." So the people that are being put under this bondage because of lacking having things apparently was egregious to Nehemiah, more so probably than what was allowed by the laws of in the Torah. And their cry was they were being mistreated. And so Nehemiah hated what was going on, as we see in the United States, or in the large part of the world in the 1700s, in the half of the 1800s, where slavery was predominant in many places in the Western world. The Spanish took slaves, English took slaves, and so forth. And move these people into the new Americas that were founded. And so then they were mistreated, and families were separated. I'm not exactly sure what they did here, but apparently it was not pleasant for these people. And Nehemiah says, and my heart took counsel with me, and I did combat against the important ones, the rich ones, and the rulers. And it doesn't say who, but rulers and important ones had control over these people by putting them into bondage. And I said to them, shall a man exact from his brother what you do? Now, a Jew was not to take, he was to treat a fellow Jew differently than a person that was not a Jew. If a person was not a Jew, then they could be into permanent slavery, but not to fellow Jews. And I put upon them a great assembly, a lot of people getting on their case. And I said to them, the rich people and the rulers, we have acquired our brothers of the Jews, having been sold to the nations by our voluntary offerings. And do you sell your brothers? So I believe what he's saying here is that they had been buying the Jews that were in bondage to probably the Babylonians and others with these offerings, and going there and having these Jews released, which was a good thing that they did. I question and wonder how many black people that were freed and made money did the same thing in the United States. Maybe they did. I haven't heard of that happening, which would have been the righteous thing for them to do if they did make money to help their brothers. But these were to be these were purchased by these voluntary offerings. And then, so if we're taking our money and offering it and buying these people, and you're selling your brothers and basically putting them under bondage, or shall they be sold to us? And they were quiet and did not find a word. They felt guilty, apparently, that they were mistreating these people and they shouldn't be doing this because of Nehemiah's coming against them. And I said, the matter is not good what you do. Should you not go forth thus in the fear of our God because of the scorn of the nations, of our enemies? Shouldn't you fear God in doing this because it's not what we are supposed to be doing, and the enemies would see that we are just like they are, basically putting these people under slavery? How are we any different? But Nehemiah was putting these rich people on a guilt trip. And also I and my brothers and my acquaintances put up for them money and grain. And we abandoned, indeed, this exaction. So I'm not exactly sure if I and my brothers and my acquaintances put up for them money, probably in grain, and bought their freedom. And we abandoned this exaction of putting them under slavery. And he says, return indeed to them even today their fields and their vineyards and their olive groves and their houses, and of the money for the grain, and bring forth to them the wine and the olive oil. So give them back what they have. Quit taking everything from everybody. Sort of reminds me of what happened with Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers, and then when he went in front of the Pharaoh, told him the dream, and then he became second in charge. He started buying everything, and eventually the Pharaoh owned everything. He owned the people, he owned all the land, he owned all their flocks and their vineyards, fields, and then the people themselves, or slavery, completely owned everything. So apparently something like this was happening. I suppose if you get some very rich people, their money is very powerful, and they can take advantage of that money and to the people that don't have any, and then exact a lot of money, and then they can hire military type people or guards or thugs that would go out and make sure that they get their money. And really a bad scene. And God basically wiped Israel out, sent them out because of these. This is just one of the things that they were doing, but this is the one that Nehemiah, of course, here is singling out. And so, anyway, he's saying, release them. And they said, the rich people, we will give it back, and we will not seek from them. We shall do as you say. So, yeah. And I called the priests, and I bound them by an oath to do as this saying. So, now I'm not exactly sure. I guess he bound the other people by the oath with the priests. And I shook off my wrap, his jacket or coat, and said, thus shall God shake off every man who does not stand by this word from out of his house and from out of his toil. So he's shaking it, and so showing them that this is what God is going to do, shake you off if you don't do the right thing. And he will be thus shaken and empty. So it's like putting a curse on them. And all the assembly said, Amen. That's the Greek word, Amen, the iglesia in Spanish, a church, assembly. And they praised the Lord. And the people did this thing. So the rich people allowed him to give them this freedom. And also from the day which he gave charge to me to be for their ruler in the land of Judah, from the 20th year and unto the 13th and the second year of Artaxerxes the king, 12 years, that even I and my brothers did not eat bread of my governing. They were able to get money and food and wealth because they were the leaders, but they didn't take it. I went to a church, a mega church, where there was thousands of people going there, maybe 50,000 people a week in Southern California, but the pastor didn't take any of the money. He had books that he had sold, and he made his living off of the books that he wrote. And so basically this is Nehemiah's righteousness of not taking the money. But the rulers before me oppressed upon the people and took from them in breads and in wine, and last money, 40 shekels. Now why 40 shekels, I'm not sure, and also their servants dominated over the people. I guess the rich people and their servants by being a thuggish maybe and controlling the people, making them give up whatever they were supposed to. But I did not do so because of the countenance of the fear of the Lord. So the rich people could care less about the things of God, and they don't worry about the repercussions of how they are going to be treated by God when we stand in front of him in the judgment and them. But Nehemiah had a fear of the Lord, which we also as Christians should have this fear of the Lord, and not to dominate people. If somebody's poor, to help your family first and help other people and people in the church, and then even non-believers. And in the work of the wall, I repaired these things. That's what he did. He did this work on the wall. I required not fields of land, and my servants and all the ones gathering were there for the work. They weren't exacting money from the people and causing problems. They were working. And the Jews and the rulers were 150 men. Now exactly what 150, the ones that were the rulers that had all this property, and the ones coming to us from the nations round about us were at my table. So apparently there were other people that were not Jewish that lived around there, even came to visit with Nehemiah, ate with them. And there was coming in one day 1 calf and 6 choice sheep and a winter yearling. There came to me also in the midst of 10 days all wine in multitude. So this food was coming, but apparently he used it for the people that were doing the work. And because it says, and with these I sought not bread of my governing, not for himself. For the slavery was heavy. So it was a big problem there, the slavery upon this people. Remember me, O God, for all good, as much as I did to this people. Always this problem with the inequality of the wealthy and the poor. It just, I think, it's a condition no matter what type of economic system you have. I know that capitalism is an economic system that you sell and make a profit, live off of it, but then there are the people who take advantage. There are bankers who can take advantage, and so some people don't like capitalism. So what the other people want is basically a socialism. But a socialism has its problems also, in that everybody is supposed to do some type of a work and share with other people, but you have the lazy people and the greedy people who take advantage of this system of socialism, and generally the socialism collapses and something bad happens to it. And then you have communism, which is sort of socialism on steroids, where there's there's no ownership of any property. Everything is shared. The government has everything and tells people what to do, almost like slavery to a certain extent, by the rule of the few people that have all the power and the communist governments that were around. Not too many. In my lifetime, it's when they began in Soviet Union before I was born, 1917, 18, and then Soviet Union. Then after the Soviet Union, I believe, was China, and then let's see, what other countries? North Vietnam, North Korea, and then Cuba, and then down in Africa, Angola, and there may be some other communist, Venezuela today. It's not communist, socialist. So these, the communist system of the economy was another economical system, but they all have problems with the inequality. Chapter 6 in Sanballat, we hear about him in the last chapter, and how he comes back and he is going to try to cause problems for Nehemiah, and we'll find out about what he tries to do in chapter 6. Hope you'll join us. God bless.